So I headed up to Crawford State Park to check out Gardner Cave. Now, I love caves, and any chance I get to go explore a cave, I'm going to jump at it. There's a lot of theories out there that Sasquatch lives and travels through cave systems and stuff like that. Now, with the amount of caves and old mine shafts that we have scattered throughout Washington State, it's very possible that, a Sasquatch would use these to live in or, you know, hang out during the winter times, whatever. So I headed up to Gardner Caves to take a tour and check out the place. So we got there an hour early so we could do a little hiking and explore the area. And while we were doing that, we heard a couple rock clacks. So I'm here at the Gardner Cave, just outside of Metaline, Washington, and we're just standing around waiting for our guided tour. And I just heard two rock clacks coming from that direction. So it's kind of cool. So I hiked in that direction of the sounds, and the only thing I came across was this X-shaped formation. So that was all that we saw and experienced when we were there. But my main interest was the cave. Now, I try to learn as much as I can about the environments that I'm working in, and I love taking tours of caves because they really break it down and explain the ecosystems of these caves. And the more knowledge we have, maybe the better we can use that knowledge to help with any type of research in the future. So, enough of my rambling. I'm going to hand it over to the tour guide.
So this is Gardner Cave. It is named this way for Ed Gardner, who was a man who settled in this area in the late 1800s. He had a little cabin down on the riverbank near where Boundary Dam is today. And Ed sounds like he was a pretty interesting guy. He had a brother in Seattle, and he would often go to Seattle to get jobs, get work with his brother. And then, as we understand it, he would get in trouble and get kicked out and come back to Metaline for a while, where he was a moonshiner. So that's why he was traipsing around out in the woods alone, we presume, and that's how he found the cave. He didn't write down when he found it or how he found it. We kind of assume he fell in. And I hope it wasn't this entrance that he fell into, because it's pretty deep and that would really hurt. But there is a closed-in entrance. It's full of debris now, but back that way there used to be another one. And if he did fall into the cave, I hope he fell into that one. So he tried to keep it secret. It's 39 degrees all year round. It's like a wonderful refrigerator. But people started learning about it, and we know that because people were coming in and signing their names in the early 1900s and using the date that they had visited. So by 1920, a man named William Crawford acquired this land. He was a businessman down in Metaline Falls. He ran a store and also had other enterprises. And what he did was he clear-cut this property, and then he donated it to the state of Washington because he knew that people would want to come visit the cave. So we can see evidence in the forest around us of that clear-cut, because when you completely clear a forest, when the trees go back in, they're really thick and they grow really tall because they're all competing for sunlight, so they're pretty thin. And even though it's different types of trees that we have around us, they're all kind of similar looking. It's not our healthiest ecosystem. So some of the tree thinning that you may have seen along the road when you came into the park is where we're trying to help this ecosystem return to a more natural state where we can have younger trees and older trees growing together. So we're going to go into the cave, and in there we will also see examples of how people have altered that space. We have a tendency to interact with and change places when we visit them, and the cave is no different. It's really important when we're in there to not touch the walls. Even though they're made of stone, they're actually pretty sensitive and are impacted even by us touching them. The floor can be pretty slippery in certain places, so please watch your step. Also watch your head when we first go in. It's a little narrow. You're going to notice a skunky odor, and that is actually from our friends the cat rats, who are the only animals who live in this cave. There aren't any bats. but the skunky smell is just at the beginning and then it fades away. So you can follow me into the first chamber, and if the last person through the gate could just swing it shut, you don't need to lock it, but just close it.
There we go. Oh, you do?
Yes. Well, we're on the floor. Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have to have
Okay, so I can't.
That's what I took the question as. That's what I.
Largest caves in Washington state. Limestone is formed at the bottom of a seabed. So the area that we're in now in North America was actually at the bottom of an ocean. And over millions of years, tectonic plates have come together and raised up to create the Selkirk Mountains where we are now, and has also lifted this limestone up to allow it to be subjected to different natural processes. So limestone is a very soft stone. It's a sedimentary stone. It's formed when organic material falls to the bottom of the ocean, turns into kind of an ooze of shells and bones and poo, and eventually becomes stone. Because it's as soft as it is, acids can carve away at it pretty rapidly, and that's what you're seeing around you. As rainwater and snow melt filter through soil, they pick up carbon dioxide and make what's called carbonic acid. And even though it's relatively weak, it's enough as it comes through the cave to carve out most of the features that we're going to see. Another thing that this acidic water does is it leaves behind mineral deposits. So some of the white that you're going to see in particular, this is calcite. It's the same type of mineral deposit you can get on your shower door if you don't squeegee it a lot. This chamber is where we see a lot of indicators of human activity. And this is fairly recent human activity. We actually don't have any record of Native Americans having knowledge of this cave or using it. As we understand it, humans did not know about it until Ed Gardner found it, although perhaps Native Americans did know about it. We're just not aware of that at this time. So in this chamber, you can see soot overhead, where once upon a time, people used to have fires in here sometime in the last 120 years. You'll also find signatures on the wall in various chambers throughout the cave, so if you're looking carefully, you're going to see marks that people have left. You will also find areas of damage where stalactites, stalagmites, and other features have been broken off, and that's because humans are humans, but we're more careful about protecting the cave today. So we're going to move further on down. You will be noticing remnants of our old 1950s lighting system. When we took that out, we just left pieces along the way so we didn't further damage the cave by trying to pull them out. And the stairway, you'll be glad to know, is not the original one, which is made of wood and was prone to rotting, but this is a much more modern system and we are all perfectly safe, so follow me. See some of these features off to my left. These are called flowstones, and they're areas where water used to flow down into the cave and create these formations as they left that calcite behind. These flowstones were also very popular visiting spots for some of the first people in the cave, and that's why they have black on their faces instead of being white. That's actually the oil left behind from our hands. And what that's done is prevent water from flowing across these anymore, so these are dead flowstones. The green that you see on them is algae from our earlier lighting systems. It had the right kind of light to allow algae to grow. We've updated our system since then in a way that doesn't allow that anymore, but you're still going to see that green. There are live flowstones further down, and they're really, really pretty, so I'm glad that we have some live ones to look at. When people look at these, a lot of times they try to interpret the shapes the way that we interpret clouds. So people look at this one and they'll call it the Christmas tree because it kind of looks like an evergreen covered in fluffy snow, the little bit of that green peeking through. People also call it the zoo because they see a lot of different animal shapes in it. Like at the top, people see a manatee, and further down, people say they see a bison head. I'm not always that creative to interpret the shapes, but you might see something in it. This flowstone we call the pipe organ. You can kind of see why if you've ever seen a big organ in the back of a cathedral. This might be the keyboard. And this would have been covered in a lot of little stalactites before people started coming in. We're going to find more of them further down in the cave. The wall behind us. What we call the signature wall. As I said, limestone is so soft you can actually carve it with your fingernails, and if you look closely, you can see where people have etched things into the wall, mostly their names. You can see that Mike was here, and Bill was here, and someone made something that looks like cat people. We're not really sure what that is. But we joke that someday, in hundreds of years, someone will be giving a cave tour, and they'll say, look, Mike and Bill, the gods of the cave that people used to revere, and they won't know that people were really just kind of being silly. Another feature that you're going to see here is a pack rat midden. We have a number of them throughout the cave. Like I said, pack rats are the only animals that live here. We don't have any bats in the cave. They visit occasionally, but don't stay. A pack rat midden is mostly made of organic materials that they carry in, and they'll build and build for hundreds or thousands of years, which is what makes them so useful for scientists. You can take a midden apart and learn about the plants that used to grow here and tell how the climate has changed over time. They're also interesting because pack rats love shiny things, so sometimes they'll take human things that they think are really neat and stow them away, and we have occasionally had to take back things from our work sites that they have wanted to keep. We're going to be looking back at this picture. And you'll get another look at it on the way out, if not everyone can see it right now. Pass by either going down or when you come back out. We have a space that we call green eggs and bacon. This is where stalagmites were forming originally. Does anyone know the difference between stalagmites and stalactites?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, if you don't,
What's that?
yeah, and if you don't know how to remember, stalagmites you might trip on the floor. So that's what these are. Stalactites hang on tightly to the ceiling. So these were stalagmites that were growing, that's why they're raised off the floor, but the water shifted. The water that comes into this cave is changing all the time. It's a very dynamic environment. So these little baby stalagmites never got to grow up to be big stalagmites. They're next to what some people say looks like a big piece of bacon, and it has some deposits from our pack rat friends on it, so you can think of it as peppered bacon. Someone came in here and named a lot of our features after food, which tells me they were very hungry when they were doing it. We'll keep going. It's a dried up stream bed. There used to be a stream that flowed in here. You can see that this would have been bright white flowstone, except that so many people have mined it over the years that it is currently dark flowstone. We had a staff member decide to crawl back in there and tell us what was in there in recent times. He said he made it about 50 feet. It got really narrow. He was crawling along on his elbows and his knees. A pack rat decided that she was having a really good time and decided to join him. And when it ran across his legs, he thought that's probably enough, and he came back out. So we know it gets really narrow and water doesn't flow through there anymore, but it used to.
What's the total damage?
We're going to go 300 feet. The cave goes a little more than 2,000 feet. Yes, yes, it's a very large cave now. Right? Almost 300 feet. Right? Yes, we're close. We have 2 more stops after this. So, can everyone hear me? Yes. All right. So the areas under our feet are what are called rimstone pools. These are formed by water coming in, mostly in large amounts in the spring. And as the water drops against the limestone, like I said, it carves it out. And at the same time, it's building the walls of its pools because the minerals in the water are pushed to the outer edges. So they build up and create these wavy walls. The waves come from the ripples as the water is dripping into the pools. They form that way permanently. So if you came and visited us on a tour in May or June, these pools are completely full of crystal clear, beautiful water. It's really, really pretty. I highly recommend it. Scientists were curious where this water goes when it drains out over the summer, so they added a non-toxic dye and found that it goes miles away and comes out down by the river near Boundary Dam, which happens to be where Ed Gardner lived more than 100 years ago. And we know that he was drinking spring water next to his cabin, which as it turns out is cave water, which is acidic, and maybe this tells us why Ed suffered from ulcers later in his life. But it could have also been the moonshine. We'll never know. Above our heads, we're seeing stalactites. A lot of them are forming in this area. And the smallest stalactites are called soda straws, because when they first form, they're hollow. And that is again because the minerals are getting pushed to the outside of each little water droplet, and it's forming a little ring around itself. Every time water passes through, it grows the straw and grows the straw, and eventually it will fill in and not be hollow anymore, but when they're little, they're just these little straws. If you get water dropped on you, by the way, it's called a cave kiss, and it's good luck. Column next to me. This is what happens when a stalactite and a stalagmite eventually come together. This one is probably about 90,000 years old, and because of the properties of the weight of limestone with calcite, this probably weighs about 15,000 pounds. It's actually the largest limestone formation in Washington State and one of the largest in the Pacific Northwest. When you pass by it, you're going to notice that there are a lot of insects on it. And that's because for the very bravest little bugs that make it all the way down here in the cave, if they land on this, that mineral-rich water is actually a little bit heavier than regular water or softer water, and so the bugs can't fly away again. They're entombed. So if you think about a really ancient mosquito who might be on the inside of this column, and you think about a scientist someday drilling in there, pulling him out, releasing his DNA, we could all live Jurassic Park, which is not really something I want to do, but maybe it's possible. You're also going to notice some signatures on the column as you pass by on this area that looks like it was kind of broken off. People liked to sign all the way down here. And there's one at the bottom that says Pearl from 1912. Now, as we understand it, Pearl was a school teacher in this area in the early 1900s. And if you think about a woman exploring this cave in 1912 in a corset, in a dress, with a candle, she was obviously very brave. When you pass by the cemetery, which there's a sign for on the road on the way back to the highway when you're heading back to Metaline, you can actually go into the cemetery and find Pearl's grave. She would have been about 20 years old when she was down here, that very brave soul. I tip my hat to her because I would not have come this far in this cave with just a candle. Yeah, okay.
So that was the end of our tour. Now I cut off the last 10 minutes of the tour just because at the end they shut off the lights and break out a black light, which is pretty cool to experience. So if you ever get a chance to come to Gardner Caves, check it out. And just to let you guys know, I do have more videos coming in the following weeks. So I will catch you guys in the next video. So enjoy yourself out there and keep it real.